humankind has evolved. Where our forefathers used to hunt for food, the tradition has, in a way, carried on. The sort of hunting that we do nowadays is for a job, though. And just as it oftentimes things could get difficult, like right now, how and where should we look for a successful hunting? My name is Jessie Hong. I'm the founder of Truth Talk Berlin. You're joining me today in our live stream in Berlin Wildcard School to get a quick look behind the curtain of recruiter and also international job seeker, where you could explore your profile and learn how to stand out in the Berlin job market as a non-German speaking or perhaps German speaking expat. Have you ever sit face to face to a recruiter and wonder what goes through their mind, what catches their eyes, and why are some of them so mean? With the numbers of non-German speaking job seekers growing quite fast in Berlin and this unique Germany Hauptstadt, how are you going to be sure that you are putting what the recruiters want on the table, what the local recruiters wanted? And to answer all these questions, before I introduce my speakers, I'd just like to very briefly thank our sponsors for the live stream today, which is Berlin Wildcard School, for offering us this beautiful campus to have the live stream over here, and also resume.io, which is an online professional CV creator. And here I would like to also mention that you could already submit your questions, which is coming up right after the panel discussion by going to slido.com. And if you're here today specifically for our panel discussion, don't leave, because they're coming up right after the keynotes, where we would have panelists talking how COVID-19 has impacted recruitment, job hunting, and freelancing in different ways. And like I mentioned before, if you have any questions, you could always submit on Slido by putting our event code Truth Talk Berlin. And now to welcome our first keynote speaker for today. This is Marie. Marie is originally from the US, and she has been calling Berlin her home for the past 10 years. She's currently the head of international sales at IC Berlin, a premium eyewear brand made in Berlin. Coming to Germany 10 years ago, to Berlin, where back then, Berlin was less of a vibrant startup hub, with limited German and no experience working and living internationally. It's pretty amazing how she has come to where she is today. And I would like to have Marie to share her part of her stories to you personally. So, welcome, Marie.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us here today on this wonderful sunny Berlin afternoon. And I'm just going to talk to you today a little bit about my experience as a job seeker here in Berlin and guide you through my story and what I went through here. Maybe I can help inspire you and give you some tips for your own job search. For a moment. So, as Jessie so lovely mentioned, I moved to Berlin about 10 years ago. At that time, my German was very limited. I didn't know anything beyond Bier bitte when I would go into one of the bars here. And I was really confident that I would be able to find a job very quickly. I had my resume from the US. I had a lot of experience in the US in sales. I took my same cover letter, resume, dusted it up a bit, and I started on the job hunt. So when I began, I looked online, the many different portals that you can find job postings, and I started sending out my resume, my cover letter, didn't change it for any of the jobs, sent out hundreds. Very confident that I would then get many interviews. Unfortunately, as I'm sure many of you may have also experienced, I pretty much had 0 interviews. In fact, I could have thrown the resumes and the cover letters into a black hole and had more of a response. And I couldn't figure out why. In the US, I had a lot of experience. If I had done the same thing in the States, I would have received many interviews and probably job offers. And I couldn't figure out what was happening. I was applying to things that I had experience in, that I knew what I was doing, and I was not getting anywhere. So after about 2 months, I'm getting very discouraged. I continue to look at all the job portals, apply to any job that I feel like I might even remotely have a skill that could work for it. I'm still not getting very many interviews, but at this time I'm also starting German lessons, building a little bit of a community here. And so I'm reaching this plateau. Don't know what to do, and I'm concerned, how am I going to make my life here? This was my plan. I came over. And I started, whenever I received an email back from a recruiter, even with a denial, even telling me, no, I'm sorry, you're not a fit, I started then asking them, why? I would reply to their emails, thank you very much, I appreciate you taking the time to email me, and I would ask them what was wrong with my resume. Why wasn't I a good fit? I thought I was a good fit. What did they think? I also started to ask my German teachers, other people in the community. I started to hand out my CVs and resumes at different networking. Tell me your thoughts on it. What do you think about it? Why am I not getting any responses? And actually, from the recruiters or from the HR people that I emailed back when I got rejections, I had about a 30% response rate. So I had some people that did write back and told me, criticized my resume, told me why I wasn't a good fit or why they couldn't see that I was a good fit. In the US, I noticed it's more important, in my experience, that you had some sort of experience and you were a good worker. Your personality counted for more. In Germany, in my experience, it's been more of a linear approach. How can they see you inside of this job? And if you are not clear with that, then you would get a lot of rejections. So from that experience that I had with the recruiters replying to me, with people in the community replying to me, I started to really tailor my resume or my CV and my cover letter. If I saw a job that I wanted to apply for, I took some of the words that I saw inside of the job description. I put them in my resume and my CV, and I started to send those then back to the HR. When I started to really tailor my approach to the different companies, I received a much better response rate. Even if I had not found everything, I was getting much more responses, many more interviews. From this, after about 6 months from when I arrived, I found my first job. So I'm very excited. Now I have a job, I passed the interview process, now I get to start working. And this is really where the real work began. I started working for a German company. I was the first foreigner they really hired in their sales department. And then I had to learn the difference in work culture between the US, my home country, and Germany. And that was a big change. I really had to learn to take criticism. I think that was a big part of learning to work in a job environment here, as well as understand the feedback that I was getting from colleagues. After I've been at this job for a while, I also am promoted, and then I have to start doing my own hiring. And I put my job ads out there in the many different job portals in English. I'm looking for an English sales. And I also received many responses, and I was thinking back to my original job seeking, when I was applying with this one single resume to every job. And I was getting a lot of those kind of responses. In my time that I've been here, and in my time also hiring, I always tried to take time, if anyone ever asked, what is wrong with my resume? Why do you not think I'm a good fit? To reply to that person. I would say definitely be bold. Ask why you're not a good fit. Even if you're not getting that job, some of the information that you might receive from the recruiters could be really helpful for your future job hunting. So now I've been working here at this German company for 3 years, and it was fine. I enjoyed my job, but through a lot of the networking events and let's say the expat world, immigrant world that you have in Berlin, the foreigner world, I found out about a really interesting startup. It was a product I thought it sounded super cool. It was something I wanted to get behind, and I really wanted to go and help this company expand into the US market in sales. And as with many startups here, after a few years, they've run out of funding, and then they go bankrupt. So I enjoyed my time there, but then I was sort of trying to figure out, what do I do? Now I have experience here in Germany. I've been here many years. And I'm trying to figure out what is my skill set here? What is my niche? How am I going to market my skills to the next level? what job do I really want to have? And this is where I think with the experience that I'd had, I was able to make sure that all of the jobs I'm applying with, I'm being very selective. I'm looking at the job portals, I'm looking for a job I think I would want to do, and then I'm researching the company. I'm trying to find out what product do they have, what is their service that they're offering, is this something I can be really passionate about, is this something I really want to do? And I think it's very important to start understanding as well your worth at the job market. What is your value? I, at this point, know my value. And then I've really started to make it where I'm very much looking for a company I want to work for. I've looked online, and I've came across IC Berlin. There was a few other companies I also applied to, but IC Berlin is made in Germany eyewear, as Jesse mentioned, and it was a product I felt I can really get behind. This is something that's exciting. It's a German company here, and I would have the skills to do this job. So I spent a lot of time researching the company, and I then wrote my cover letter and the CV for it specifically, based on their job description, which I knew I could do. I then took all of that information, sent it in. I applied to a few other companies as well. And this time I only applied to 6 companies. I wasn't mass emailing, I wasn't just opening up my resume on a job portal. And from this, the 6 basically applications that I made, I pretty much had 5 job offers. From those, I chose the company I'm currently with, where I've been now about 4 years, is IC Berlin. So I think having that sort of very tailored approach and approach to understanding your value really helped me to succeed here in the job market. In the beginning, it looked doom and gloom. I wasn't going to find anything. And then after I've gone through all of these phases, I really understand what can make you successful here. What can you do that can bring value to different employers? So I think a key part of it is understanding the difference in the culture between whatever your home country is and Germany. Even if you're applying at international companies or companies that maybe just have an office in Berlin, a lot of times the HR ends up being German, or they've been here a long time, so they're used to the German culture. It's very important that you understand however worked for you in your home country might not work here. And having that difference and being able to tailor your approach to the job market in such a way can really help you be successful. And I think the key, what I've also seen, and what many of the recruiters told me, or the HR professionals told me when I would ask them, is they couldn't understand how I could work for the job. They didn't see from my experience doing XYZ how I would fit in ABC in their job. So it was very important to understand I had to be extremely detailed in my CV and in my cover letter. Why would I be good for that role? I took a lot of sentences directly from the job descriptions and put them in my cover letter, explaining how I had exactly that same experience. I think this is really helpful for the HR and the recruiters and the professionals there that are looking for the hiring. How can they imagine you in that role? And that was very helpful for my job searches later. I think another big difference is that as I mentioned before briefly, finding your niche. What do you bring to the table? Even if you don't know German, what are your other skills? What skills do you have? What languages do you have? What experience do you have in your home country or in other countries you've worked in that would be different from the average job seeker here? Finding out if you're, what do you have to bring to the table? And also finding out how is that going to be successful here? If you can write really well, if you're a good you can write nice copy and you're a native English speaker or a Spanish speaker or Portuguese speaker, going and using that to your advantage, because there's not so many maybe in the job market. Or, you know, for me it was in sales. I was in B2B, B2C sales in the US, And here I was able to transfer those skills to selling international sales market. But there's a lot of other people I know that have done marketing and using their different skills in writing and other advantages that you would have to find their niche here in the job market. And looking really at what skills they're posting in the job description and how does that parallel with your own skills. And once you find out what those are, really trying to make sure that that's what you're focusing on in your interviews with the different people in HR and the different managers to show that it's your niche, what you're good at. And I also think don't sell yourself short. I've seen a lot of people say, I'll take any job. Just give me a job. I just want to work. I need to pay my rent. And I get it. I understand, you know, we're all human. We all have bills. And but at the other hand, you know, don't settle for the first thing that comes. Know what your value is in the job market. Know what your skills are. And even if this company isn't going to pay you for that skills or however it might work in your own personal life, there would be a company out there that would do it. There's a lot of people that I think sometimes just settle because they just want to take any job. And I think the biggest tip I can give to you is to really know your own value and understand that whatever you're bringing is something that no one else can do. And there would be a company out there that would appreciate that. It's also important to find a company that you want to work for. Is it something you can get up and you're excited to go to work every day? You're excited to go in and, you know, for us, I get to go and see a factory that makes eyeglasses. I know everybody that's making our eyewear, and when I talk to customers in Hong Kong and in Malaysia, I can really describe the people and the feelings that we have there at the company. But there's a lot of other great companies in Berlin. There's a lot of companies that make a software product that might make your lives easier. There's a lot of companies that do good social work. So I think it's important to also find the passion and understand that it's this two-way street. It's not just you are out here just trying to find something. You also want to have something where you want to go to work. And I think it's important to realize that you have this value and you're not just a number in a machine. You're a person and you can make a good contribution not just to the company but also to our society as a whole. And looking for companies that reflect your values, I think, are much more important. Even now when I'm doing job interviews for my team, if someone doesn't directly come from our industry, and to be honest, there's not tons of people that are out there selling eyeglasses, so I'm not going to go out and find 20 people that have that same experience. For me, I also look for someone that was passionate about the company. Did they look us up online? Did they understand what we do? If they came in and said, I just applied for sales, I have no idea what you do here, that would be a big red flag. I'm always looking for someone that knows what we're doing, that wants to work there, that wants to be a part of the team. For me, that's worth much more than I have 20 years of experience doing this. If someone is passionate about being there and wants to come in and is excited about what you're doing, it has a big value. And as I said, it's a very two-way street. So make sure that when you're also applying for jobs, there's jobs that you really want to do and something that you're excited about. So now you can see my contact details. As I said, I've been here about 10 years and I've gone through all of it. In the beginning, I think I would have taken anything. Just someone, please come give me 100 euros. I'll do just to sweep streets, work in cafes. I think we've all been there if we're foreigners. But I think when you start to be here for a while, you really understand that what you are here as a non-German speaker or German speaker, as a foreigner here, you're bringing a different skill set than anyone else that maybe is from here or lived here. And that's something I think that sometimes we just get caught in a spiral, and that's something that's really hard to break, but it's important to realize that whatever you have, even if you've not been successful up until this point, it doesn't mean you won't be successful in the future. Anyone can go from, as I said, in the beginning I was here about 6 months before I found my first job here. I went to the Ausländerbehörde. I think I was there about 10 different times. I tried to get my visa situation straightened out. So, you know, I've been there. And I think there is light at the end of the tunnel. We can all come out on that other side with a job and a career and a path forward here in this city. So that's what I have for you today. Here's my contact details, and I think if you have questions.
Marie's keynote was not just insightful. I'm pretty sure a lot of her tips given are going also to be a very timely wake-up call for a lot of international job seekers out there who has been, long on an unsuccessful job hunt, where you could take some of her advices and experiences to potentially optimize, improvise, and also re-navigate yourself on the journey. If you have any questions for Marie, you can always go to slido.com, submit our event code, which is Truth Talk Berlin, singular, no space in between. You'll be able to submit your question. You could also specify her name if that's a question for her, for example. And surely it's not going to be easy when someone says, work for your purpose, work for a company that you want to work for. It's not so easy. Have you ever clicked on a job position, like a job offer on LinkedIn? You clicked on it, and then it says 300 other applicants. And you're just like, wow, who are they? Are they even real? What do recruiters think about it when they click on something and then they see, oh, we have got 300 applications? What are recruiters going to do about it, and what actually catches their minds, and what do they think about it even? How do you even compete when there are 300 applications out there? It is perhaps interesting to know what's happening on the other side of the coin. For that, we have our second keynote speaker today, and also our last keynote speaker, Martin. Martin is a senior recruiter who has been working in the field of talent acquisition, people operation, and also in HR for several years. And he is here today to debunk, or perhaps confirm, some of your misconception or preconceptions, and to dispel some myth about recruitment. And so I would like to welcome Martin. And before that, Martin is also going to be one of our panelists on our panel discussion coming up right after the keynote. So if you would like to know what Martin is going to talk about, the new norm of recruitment brought about by COVID-19, stay with us. And now, welcome Martin.
Hello. I'm very excited to be here, and it's very interesting listening to Marie as well. I think one of the questions I get asked quite a lot is, how do I actually approach this job search monster that stands in front of me? And I think that Marie couldn't have done a much better job than I would ever be able to. And that's what I'm here to talk about really today. What I would like to see get into is a little bit more on what it looks like on the other side of the coin. What happens behind the curtain? So at the moment, I work as the head of people operations at Prisma. We're a tech tooling startup. We work across most of Southern San Francisco and Berlin. But I've also worked with a lot of other startups in a consulting capacity. Everything from air freight to travel to any kind of startup you can almost imagine. So if anybody has any questions or has anything particular to an industry, happy to field any of those questions in a Q&A a bit later. So just to give you a quick idea of what I think I would like to do today, what I am here to do is firstly to give everybody a quick look behind the curtains. I've worked with quite big teams, recruiting from thousands and thousands of people a year to recruiting a few people for very, very specialist roles. But I want to give everybody a little bit of a view of what does it look like on my side of the world. And I also want you to try and develop some empathy for what recruiters go through every day, what their jobs are actually like, and also to defend some of my very hardworking colleagues for all the work that they put in. That is not just, they very hardly have a voice, and I really want to also bring forward their part of the argument. What I'm not here to do is to defend bad behavior or to excuse recruiters from a lot of the bad things that they do actually do. I've been guilty of many of those things, my colleagues have been guilty of many of those things, but I'm hoping that this talk will show you that none of this is really on purpose. None of this is really on purpose, but we are trying our best. Cool. So the first thing I'd like to do is what I call hating on recruiters, a social media expose. There are a few channels across the world. One of my favorites is Recruiting Hell. It's a subreddit, which mainly is dedicated exclusively to hating on recruiters. And it's quite an interesting thing that I look into quite a lot. It's a nice way for me to figure out what other people are doing wrong, to communicate to my team or to myself, don't do that. Do something better than that. There's also a lot of other Twitter accounts like the State of LinkedIn that I quite look quite fond of. But let's get into a few interesting things that are quite common, and this is me really telling you things that people do wrong that there's no excuse for. That is terrible, and I just want to acknowledge those before I get into why some of those things might happen. So one of my favorite ones that happens quite a lot in the software development industry, and the one here on the top left is one of my favorite persons. Sebastian Ramirez wrote Fast API 1.5 years ago, and coincidentally was looking for a job after writing the code, where he found that there's a job that would require 4 years of experience in the code that he has himself only invented 1.5 years ago. And this is actually quite common. You'll see on the top right there is a Kubernetes position that requires 12 years of experience with Kubernetes, although Kubernetes was only invented 6 years ago. So somehow some person would have to be able to go back in time to get another 6 years experience to make this magical 12-year number. And again, with another example there of Angular, where Angular has only existed for 5 years, but somebody's looking for 6 years experience. There's also some other terrible things that people do. And again, this is not, and I want to also express that these are not small companies. At the bottom right is Ernst & Young, for instance. They put up a job ad which had no job description in it whatsoever, no requirements, and that was a public piece of information. That's inexcusable. No person should be doing that, and I promise you that person is probably not doing that on purpose. But I can understand the frustration and the irritation and sometimes the criticism that the whole recruitment industry receives because of these mistakes that people make. And then there's a few things like compensation, $0, which is my favorite level of compensation. I've even seen internships being advertised where you have to pay the company to do your internship, which is a whole new form of remuneration that happens. And at the bottom left one was just the language being very, very terrible. But what I'm just here to say is that those things are bad. I acknowledge them, my peers acknowledge them. People from Google and Facebook that I've spoken to make the same mistakes. And yes, we acknowledge all of those. And it is our intention to try and do better. But I also just want to, as I mentioned, maybe give a little bit of another side of it. And that is that sometimes people's expectations can also be quite unrealistic. Or what do they expect of people and how do they perceive things? So we were talking, Marie was talking earlier quite well, and I think she made a very good point in the beginning. She said she sent out hundreds and hundreds of resumes to various different jobs. And there's actually a great statistic on that. It says over 78% of people will send their resume out to a job for which they are not qualified. So if you're sitting on the recruitment side, you can already kind of see where I'm heading with this, I hope. And it becomes quite a bit of an interesting thing to work with. And then also, for instance, on the left-hand side there is a criticism of a particular practice where somebody would already be kind of earmarked for a job, and people being unhappy that they are continuing through an interview process. But there are reasons for those things. In that particular instance, a recruiter will never regret or decline a job application until somebody is actually signed. So there is a whole way of how that works. But there are a lot of unrealistic expectations of recruiters, and I think you will understand it a little bit more, and I'm going to dive into a small piece of data. I created a bit of a case study for us to kind of go through. But most of the time, these things are explained by basically only one thing. Most recruiters are permanently overwhelmed by how much they have to do, how much they have to get through, and how much it means to the people that are actually going through it. It's not the same, when you're doing recruitment, it's not the same as, for instance, selling a car or something like that. It's usually the person's career, it's their life, they're heavily invested in the process. And if you look at some of the data from that, I took Blinkist, which is a very well-known Berlin company. It's easier from a statistical point of view to get a position in Harvard University than to make it in Blinkist. Blinkist gets less applications, more applications than Harvard does, and selects less people for those applications. So if you imagine it in that way, you kind of start seeing where that trend's heading. And there's also a whole bunch of interesting data that you can go look up, but roughly every job that a recruiter will work on will get about 250, and actually, as a matter of fact, now it's increasing to about 300 or 400 applications per channel. It's not actually per job, but per channel that they're advertising. So if they advertise on LinkedIn and Indeed and Glassdoor, that's 1,200 applications roughly at the moment. So what I'd like to do is to give you an idea of what a day looks like for a recruiter. I'm not necessarily talking about a day, I'm more referencing the Beatles there, but this is basically what you can expect. And what I've done is I've created a little avatar for us, the photo of which is my younger sister, so it's with her permission, and kind of trying to create an idea of what Mane's life would look like. But Mane is my sister, she does not work for HelloFresh, she's not working recruitment, she's only here as an avatar for us to kind of have to personalize it and to really put a name and a face to it and realize that that person over there is actually going through all of this as well. And let's imagine that Mane is working for HelloFresh, which is a really big and successful company that lots of people want to work for, and she works in the marketing department. So let's assume a few things before we continue with looking at Mane's day. And this is something that maybe you can think about. It's like when you think about a recruiter, you probably want them to spend an equal amount of time on every application that they receive, so that all people are treated fairly in some way. So when I say, like, let's say Mane gets 100 CVs, that her initial time that she spends on each CV should be roughly equal. The only way to not do that is to be biased or discriminatory, so we assume that the person would be spending equal amounts of time. And then also to not work with keywords. So this is another piece of criticism you'll see a lot for the recruitment industry, is that they don't want us to work with keywords. You can get very great AI tools now that can pull keywords out of resumes, but people don't want us to do that. So we want to maintain then a human touch to it, that some time is actually spent on a resume. So here's an interesting question before I continue to ask yourself. If you were to apply to a job, how much time do you think Mane should realistically spend on your resume? So if we look at basic reading speeds and things like that, if she spends two minutes on your resume and your resume is 2 pages, she's reading at 300 words a minute. If you spend 5 minutes on a resume, she's reading at 120 words a minute, and more than 5 minutes, well, then it just depends on how much more than 5 minutes, I guess. But even 2 minutes seems like a little. And it seems quite like it's something that means a lot to you, it's something you're heavily invested in, and you would probably want someone to spend a bit more time on that. But let's dig a little bit deeper, and maybe you'll get some understanding of why some of that's actually not possible. And we'll show you a lot of the data that actually makes it, some of the horrific numbers that come out of the recruitment industry, why it ends up being like that. So in this scenario, most recruiters will work on roughly about 4 to 5 roles at a given time. In this instance, you can see this job for International Consumers Insight Manager at HelloFresh was posted 2 days ago at the time I pulled it off the internet, and in 2 days they had 392 applications. That's only on LinkedIn. And this is all sorts with Mane, right? Mane has 392 things that Mane needs to look at. Then another role that you might be working on will be the Online Marketing Manager role, which you already received 80 applications for in 6 days. And again, that's only on LinkedIn, so you should probably be advertising on HelloFresh's homepage and Indeed and Glassdoor. And you can kind of see how this trend keeps going. So for the Director of Marketing Communications, 323 applications received in 2 weeks. And then also for the CRM Audience Manager, they received 98 applicants in 1 week. So if you roughly try and put that together, I kind of like just fleshed out the numbers a little bit and padded it a bit to get more to a realistic number. So if you double all of those, assuming that you also have Indeed and all of that, Mane will have to work with roughly about 1,784 applications at a given time, at any point, which is a lot. And as Marie was saying earlier, each of those people care tremendously about their individual resumes and that they're being taken care of. But if you go back to what we were talking about in terms of the amount of time that Mane is able to spend, so let's look at like a few hypothetical scenarios. So if she spends 2 minutes reading each of those resumes, so that doesn't allow her to analyze it, it doesn't allow her to send an email back, it doesn't allow her to ask a question or anything like that. If she were just to stack them up in a giant pile and read them at a good speed of 300 words a minute, she'll be reading non-stop for 1.5 weeks. If she spends 5 minutes on every resume, which maybe even allow her to ask a question or something, she'll spend 3.5 weeks, almost 3.7 weeks, almost a month, permanently reading, non-stop, without breaks, only taking a lunch, doing nothing else, no meetings, no quick cool drink breaks with a friend, no like doctor's appointments, nothing. She'll have to read non-stop for a month to get there. So how does that impact her job? How does Mane feel by resume number 1,720? Like, what does her cognitive capacity look like? What's her ability like to actually read through things? Like, how tired are you? I mean, I think War and Peace is shorter than that. It's like basically reading some of the longest books in the world permanently. And Mane would be required to hire roughly about 2 to 3 people a month. So next month it starts all over again. And that's roughly where a lot of these things, what it looks like for the average recruiter. So when Marie was giving the example, for instance, of replying to when you get a declined response from a recruiter to start replying to them back. Now, in this scenario, Mane wouldn't be able to reply to Marie. Mane would have to ignore Marie just to get through all of those resumes in about a week and a half. And that's quite a tough situation. It's a tough situation for everybody, and it leads to a lot of bad behavior. And it leads to all of the behaviors you've seen before, all of the things that people hear about. Recruiters that didn't respond to me, they didn't get back to me, I don't get feedback, I don't get invited to any interviews. A lot of those things is the reason why. Is that by the time that Mane receives your resume, you might be number 1,420, and she's pretty tired at that point. And if it's not immediately obvious to her, like Marie also said, if it's not immediately obvious to her why you are the right person for this job, a recruiter will spend between 5 and 7 seconds on your resume, on average, nowadays. It takes us 5 to 7 seconds to look at a resume and move on to the next one. That's how quickly it happens. So if it's not immediately obvious, if we don't know from the get-go, then we'll have no idea that you might be the right person for the job. So sometimes people try to get creative. They try and do things in an interesting way. And doing things in an interesting way actually is not that great. Because what we want to know is how quickly we can figure out, are you the right person for the job, or should we spend more time? But if I look at it, for instance, a resume that's just a lot of text, for instance, I'll immediately just skip past it. Because to me, it's not immediately obvious, and I've got another 1,400 resumes to go through. So I would just skip over it. So there's a lot of false negatives. There's a lot of people that might have been great for the job, that end up not being selected because of those things. So the next question is Mane's time reading through resumes even well spent? Is that a useful way to try and hire someone? And actually the evidence from research shows that it isn't. Resumes are really poor predictors of future performance. And if you look at what comes out of largely the academic community, where they can do longitudinal studies of looking at people's resumes, how those resumes were rated, and then moving on to how those people performed, you can kind of see this over here, and it's very small, and I apologize for that. But if you look at the green arrows on that, and this is all stack ranked in terms of what in psychometrics is called predictive validity. So it's the ability for a particular selection instrument to tell you whether the person is going to be successful at the job. So when we look at something like the green arrows, those are mainly things that will come from your resume. And if you look at the bottom, it's like years of education, your job experience in years, biographical data, and things like that are actually not even good indicators of how well you will do at a job. The most reliable way of finding out how well someone will do as a job is by doing something what we call aptitude tests, and they can take various different forms. And you also get doing job-related tests or trying to recreate job scenarios. All those things are much better predictors. But the irony of that is that even though they're better, and even though they would give everybody a better chance for the best person to actually get the job, nobody wants them. People don't want to apply for jobs and get an auto-reply back that says, oh, please complete this assignment for me. Because now what's happening is the workload is being pushed back. So the recruiter is saying, well, I'm not going to spend a month and a half reading through all of your resumes. Why don't you just perform this assessment for me? But the response from the market on that behavior is extremely poor. It is extremely difficult for recruiters to even convince managers to have that done, because managers still want to sit with the old way of doing things where they read through resumes and invite people for interviews. They honestly don't want to do that. The second strongest indicators are actually doing interviews. Like structured or unstructured interviews are actually not that different in terms of how good they are at predicting people's future work performance. But one of the problems with that is that that's really time consuming. So there's no practical way to interview 1,784 people. If you had to put that as an hour per person, just spend, if you only took an hour, and that means half an hour of arranging it and half an hour of interviewing, you'd probably be stuck doing that for a year. And there's no way then to deliver on the results that the recruiter is required to do, and that's to hire 3 people a month, 2 or 3 people maybe, depending where you work. So that makes it quite interesting. Because the obvious answer to the question should be, why don't we just automate the least involved and most predictive stuff? Why don't we just automate things like workplace assessments? Why don't we just automate tests? And the main reason for that, as I mentioned before, is people don't like it. People really dislike it, actually. If you look at some of these things, some comments on those kinds of practices would be, okay, congrats, you've applied for this job, now give us your time and you'll work for free. Another one is, don't do it, your time is worth more than this garbage. Trial periods are a red flag. Do we find work for free? This goes to Reddit. All of these are exactly the same. So the irony of the whole recruitment sort of paradox that we sit in is that the best practices creates the worst customer experience. So if we see our candidates as customers, which is what we're trying to move towards, and recruitment has been rebranded a lot of times. HR is now called people operations, recruitment is called talent acquisition. All of these things have changed to try and get rid of this negative stigma. But it really can't go away because there is this conundrum where it is impossible for us to solve the problem because the best practices are extremely disliked. So the question, I guess, where it goes to from here is, can you win this fight? Is it possible to actually solve this problem? And there are actually a few companies in the world that are working towards really great, and there's one Berlin company called High People that's really working towards democratizing and simplifying psychometric aptitude tests. It will make them a lot faster, a lot cheaper, and a lot more accessible to the average person and the average company. And there's also a way to centralize these data, but that's also now struck down by GDPR. But that kind of gives you an idea of how difficult the situation is that the average recruiter sits in. They're not sitting at work thinking like, how can I annoy or how can I disregard this person? They're really overwhelmed and they don't even have the tools that they have, don't really work, not because the tools are not relevant, but because people don't want them to be used or people don't want to use them. So why can't it be solved? Again, you have an overly engaged customer and only one success per role. So if you look at in that scenario, let's look at one of the roles where somebody had 392 applicants. 391 of those people are going to be unhappy. This is a very, very difficult situation for a recruiter to be in. And honestly, what recruiters tend to do is once they identify 2 or 3 people that they think might be successful, they kind of ignore everybody else. And they can't do anything because from a sort of policy and compliance perspective, they have to wait until somebody has accepted an offer before they would actually be able to tell them that they've been unsuccessful. Which will often explain why people would say, oh, I had my second interview and it's been 3 weeks and I haven't heard anything back. It's mostly because the person that they want to give an offer to doesn't want to sign it, or they're renegotiating their contract, and they don't want to tell you that you haven't been successful and then come back later if the first person didn't accept the offer and tell you, oh, that other person we really wanted, they didn't accept the offer, but you're a great second choice. Nobody wants to be a second choice. Part of that is, as I mentioned, managers and applicants dislike the best tools. They don't like using it, they find it time consuming, and a lot of this comes down to what Marie said, is that it's way too much of what we call spray and pray. You kind of just send your CV out and hope for the best, instead of people being very focused and very direct. And if people started doing that, it will help recruiters a lot, and it will actually give you a much better chance for any recruiter to understand what you're doing and where you're going with your job application. It's also very difficult for recruiters to be transparent. If somebody asks me the question, a lot of the times recruiters would say, I'm sure many of you have read this sentence that says, unfortunately, we found another applicant that we feel better meets our needs at this time. Very, very common sentence. The thing is, we can't tell you anything. We can't go into the details of who that person is. We can't, that's completely confidential information. So we can only kind of give this large, almost vague sentence. And the only other thing that we can try and do is to give someone some detailed feedback like some of the people did for Marie. The problem is that opens a channel of communication. And recruiters don't like channels of communication with people they don't intend to hire, because they've got 1,700 applications to go through. So they're kind of busy with it. And I know maybe some of this sounds harsh, and my intention was for it to sound a little bit harsh because I'm trying to explain a reality that my colleagues face every day, and this is what happens, and this is what they go through, and it is tough. and they are not trying to make life difficult, but that is what they're going through. And through all of this, mostly what everybody's trying to do is to not really offend anybody. Nobody wants to be overly direct. Like if I could I used to, at some point in my life, I had a little bit more time, and I would spend Saturday afternoons writing back to people who gave really bad applications to jobs and actually gave them proper feedback on like, this is how you can improve your resume. But most people don't want to spend their Saturday afternoons that way. And I don't either. Like, I didn't either, but I felt like a almost moral compulsion to do it. But I grew tired of it after a while as well. And I think nowadays there are such great resources on the internet to help you that maybe me doing that is not really that necessary. And all of this happens also, the world I'm describing is happening in a world where you're applying to jobs. There's a whole other world, where what we talk about in recruitment, called passive candidates. And that's where we actually go out and find other people. And that's a whole different thing that also happens. And it has a whole different set of numbers and a whole different set of statistics and a whole different set of behaviors. I don't want to get into here. But that kind of hopefully gives you a good overview in terms of what we go through quite regularly. So can we do it better? I definitely think recruiters can. There's loads and loads of room for improvement, which I'm fortunate about because it gives me something to do. And one thing is keeping things simple. So from our side, both from applicants that we receive and as recruiters, I think what everybody can do is trying to keep things simple. Don't get things too convoluted or too interesting almost. Keep it very to the point. The next thing is what I think us as recruiters could start doing better is also to say no to people faster. Like often I do think that we do hold people along because we're also scared of losing a good candidate, but often it would be better for us to improve in that way. The next thing is for us to stay off social media, which is what I do a lot. Hang around and read a lot of bad criticism of my industry. But I also think that it's quite positive, but I also think in general, as applicants, it's not a good idea to generally badmouth recruiters. We do go and find your social media links just before we want to hire you. That's part of what we will do for reference checking, and there are some components of that. And if we're not sure about something, that's definitely something people will do, and we've found some interesting stuff in the past, which I'd rather not talk about. And finally, I think, and that sort of ties into the second point, is as recruiters, I think we want to make decisions quickly, we want to get people hired, we want to get people into jobs, but we do have quite a bit to do. So, you know, our lives we can make our own lives easier, but I also think that the market responds in a very interesting way, and we're still kind of grappling with how to make that better. And the tools that we have now are a lot more powerful than they were maybe 5 or so years ago. But yeah, it's still a work in progress. It's still a very difficult job. And if you do have a recruiter that you work with or a colleague that is in that industry, like spare a moment to think about how much they actually have to deal with. It is quite a bit of work. It's not as easy, and they're not monsters, they're not bad people. They're really just trying to satisfy a manager that wants a good hire, and the rest of it doesn't matter to the manager either, to be honest. And yeah, I guess that's everything from me. There's my contact details there, I think. Otherwise, you can easily find me on LinkedIn. All my social profiles are super open. That's part of my job as well. So please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn if you have any questions. Yeah, otherwise, thank you very much.
Martin's keynote speech is often, for us, oftentimes as an applicant, you know, in a somewhat passive role, very unlikely to peep into. If you have more questions, you know, trying to dig into what recruiters' daily lives is like, what do they usually deal with, what they think about certain things, you could always go to slido.com, submit our event code, which is Truth Talk Berlin, singular, no space in between. You'll be able to submit your questions and they will be answered after the panel discussion. And if you would like to receive, this is Martin, Megan, and Anna. They are going to be on our panel discussion, which is coming right afterwards. Martin is going to be also one of our panelists talking about the new norm of COVID-19's, that brought about by COVID-19's, and we've got different panelists representing different industries to talk about the impacts. So if you're curious about what industries are still hiring, are still doubling their hiring, where you could still look for chances and how you could optimize your profile. Stay with us, don't leave. And if you'd like to receive a 1-year premium account, can someone do it for me? Sorry. Anyway, if you'd like to receive a 1-year premium account with resume.io, which is our sponsor, which I've also actually mentioned at the beginning of the event, you could just, share a quick takeaway from the keynotes if you just listen from our keynote speakers, Marie and also Martin, and maybe also later for the panel discussion, or just give us a quick shout out on social media. We're basically active on LinkedIn and Instagram, and you will receive a 1-year premium resume.io account. And you would get all the premium access to just all the functions like having unlimited PDF downloads and also unlimited templates for CV and cover letters that are actually categorized by industries. So you don't get one for all. That's something that's kind of customized for you and your professional background. You're not able to see it over here. I'm very sorry. It's a little bit embarrassing, but I'm pretty sure you will get it. And yeah, again, if you have any questions, go to slido.com. I am now going to meet my panelists and we are going to prepare to kickstart the panel discussion. I will see you guys very soon and talk to you later. Truth Talk Berlin. We are currently at our sponsored shooting space at Berlin Wild Code School. I'm Jessie Holmes, I'm the founder of Truth Talk Berlin, and I'm also going to be your moderator today for the panel discussion. And I'm glad to have a couple of expert panelists with me today to tackle the topic of COVID-19's impact on recruitment, job hunting, and also freelancing. I know that everyone has been quite overwhelmed by how news about COVID-19 is, involved in our daily life, but perhaps what's much more devastating is that we can't do anything about it. We can't restart the year, we can't restart anything. COVID-19 has quite literally transformed how the way world works in general. Where do the opportunities lie now? And what has changed? What hasn't? What can we do with it and what can we do about it? And to answer all these questions, I have Martin today with us. Martin is a senior recruiter. He has been working in the field of talent acquisition, people operation, and HR and across the world. And we also have Anna over here. Anna is the owner of Green Butterfly Coaching and Recruiting. Anna is also a job coach at GFBM, the non-profit organization for vocational opportunities and trainings. And with freelancers often being one of the first to be made redundant during financial, economically challenging and difficult times as they worked on a project-by-project basis, we have Megan here with us today to talk about how COVID-19 has altered the work opportunities for freelancers. And she's also going to talk about how you could deal with the crisis as a freelancer. And before I dive right into the first questions, I'm very proud to announce our sponsor for our panel discussion today, which is the Wine, Italian wine in Berlin, Prenzlauer Berg. If you're wondering what this wine have to do with a panel discussion that's talking about COVID-19 and job, career, well, wine is really important in our life. And if you are currently on your job hunt and it has been quite or rather unsuccessful, don't let up. This is the reason why we're doing the panel today, and which is also why you need a good bottle of Sauvignon Blanc, especially from the north of Italy, from Friuli. It's fruity, it's light. You can also drink it during the daytime and, without getting too drunk, and you can still be able to browse your job listings and just take a sip of wine, wake up in the morning. Everything is still fine. We have our expert speakers over here today to give you some tips, and I hope you would have some takeaway with you. So, and also, how they say, the more you drink, the more truthful you are. So here we are today with the wine. And should we cheers before we start?
Thank you.
Cheers.
Fresh.
Very good. Okay, so now I'd like to just dive into the first question that I have for everyone. What has changed in your industry, and what are you or should be concerned about regarding the COVID-19 situation? I have introduced your professional background a little bit, very briefly. Perhaps you can talk more about your background, what you do, and in your career and relate it to your industry. And so our audience could also know which industry you are representing. So maybe you could start first, Anna.
Yeah, my name is Anna, as just mentioned by Jessie. I'm currently the owner of Green Butterfly Coaching and Recruiting, and I'm also a job coach at GFBM, which is a non-profit organization. But in my previous life, let's say, I was for more than 20 years employed in finance and operations area in different industries. So partly it was about industries connected with software, IT also. I think, Martin, you have also a strong link to IT. So I had a good possibility to build up a good insight related to many industries. So I use it, of course, in my current professional life as the owner of Green Butterfly, and also in my current position at GFBM as a job coach.
Wonderful. Hi, I'm Megan, and I am the founder of MTC, the content agency, and I am also a B2B content marketing strategist. So in my agency, as a freelancer and also as an agency owner, I work with a lot of B2B technology clients, And we work with them both here in Berlin, but also globally and also in Germany. So I can add a lot of different perspectives on being a freelancer and a business owner, working in these type of fields and these type of verticals. In addition to being an agency owner, I am also a founder of Freelancing Women. So if you're here today, I'm happy that you could join me. And that as a freelancer in this type of world, I hear lots of stories from the other freelancers here in our community in Berlin. And so as a founder of Freelancing Women, I hope to also give you additional insight on how I can help.
Cool. I'm Martin. I work in people operations and recruitment, talent acquisition, mostly across the technology space, both in the US and Germany. So I'm interested in hearing everybody else's perspectives on how COVID-19's been kind of affecting them as well, and trying to get some perspectives from the employer side and sort of, when we're looking to hire and what's changed for us in our practices. To adapt to what's been going on, and excited.
Yeah, so what are the most remarkable shifts or focuses or priority that has changed in the industry that you could tell the audience about? Be in recruitment, in IT, and also in freelancing, what have you noticed?
So generally, we had a short talk previously that we do see a positive shift in IT, of course. So maybe you have a strong link to IT as well. So definitely, my observation is that positions linked to IT, as they are like still open, and the number of the positions in IT, we can say they are actually increasing strongly because of the COVID situation. Because of course, mid-business, bigger businesses are trying to grow and trying to offer more online products. So I think this is a development everybody expected already in March, I think. So I still have to confirm this tendency is still present, still visible in many branches and in many industries who want to employ or who need IT experts, generally speaking, I would say.
Do you have anything to say about or to add on to what Anash said, Martin?
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. I think what's been interesting in the field of software development and information technology is the fact that a lot of the larger players, Google and Facebook more specifically, has moved to a remote first space, which actually created quite a nice opportunity for, I think, people throughout the world to actually now start realistically applying for those jobs from their home countries. From a recruitment perspective, that's actually in the IT space specifically broadened the hiring pool, which makes life a little bit easier, and I think also provides opportunities for people to work with these really forward-thinking organizations without having to immigrate or go through all of those kind of difficult pieces. But a lot of other industries have had the absolute reverse happen and are really trying to scramble to figure out what to do. If you look at like events management or anything really that deals with groups of people or deals with really like areas that you can't do remotely or do virtually, and that's a whole different challenge, and it's a redefinition of work. And if you look at the environment we are in now, it's because of that, right? It's not the way that it would have been otherwise. And Jesse has done a lot of work to figure out how to do it this way, and I think a lot of people are trying to figure it out.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned about remote work, because I think Twitter, some companies, Twitter included, they have just announced that they will make remote working a permanent option for employees. And do you see this happening more and more? And what does it mean for those people who are, what does it mean for companies who tend to hire more locally, for example, and what about also to those people who might find difficulties to work remotely, say, children at home and so on?
I think it strongly depends from the industry, because there are some industries which rely still very much on paper documentation. So you cannot really, because of some regulations linked to data security, you are not allowed by law, by local law, or some general guidelines to work with digitalized copies of documentations. So I would say Very generally speaking, it really depends from the industry. I would generally say that, for example, startups, because I think Marie today mentioned startups as well, are more open to work with digitalized processes and solutions. They are more open-minded for new way of working and also working at home. This is at least my experience in every country. Actually, young companies, startups are pretty much open to that. This is, of course, as mentioned, in my opinion, also linked to the industry, because there are some specific regulations, also local regulations in each industry, so it's not always possible to work like 50% from home because of these regulations, although the owners of the company or the CEOs or CFOs would like to offer this kind of solution to the employees, but because of these regulations, it's not always possible. This is my experience.
Thank you, Anna. And for Megan, you are a freelancer, and I assume that your way of working has been more towards remote working. How has it changed because of COVID-19? Does it have a big difference on your career?
So this is a good question. It actually hasn't changed in the perspective that I work from home, and many of my colleagues who are also freelancers, we all work from home also. So the adaptation to this new kind of world has been very easy for us. But where I have seen it being difficult is actually through my clients. Because just like we had said here, is the clients that I work with are having to transition overnight. And the differences between the clients are the ones who are already service-based. So they already are maybe more of a startup and kind of mindset too, so they can transition overnight. And so actually seeing it from the outside has been also a fun and interesting experience.
I see. So has self-employment, because people used to think self-employment is something that's rather unstable. You worked on a project-by-project basis. You never really know when you're getting your next paycheck from your clients, for example. Mm-hmm. But I feel like a lot of people have changed their thoughts because of COVID-19, because of the flexibility and so on. Do you think self-employment has become safer than a full-time job? What is your 2 cents being a full freelancer?
I think this is a hard question to answer, to be honest, because everything about freelancing and owning your own business is all about uncertainty. That's how it is. And if you want to get into this field, you have to be comfortable with things changing, and you have to be willing to adopt and to pivot very quickly. And so this is the type of mindset that you need to have in general in order to survive in any sort of business in freelancing and business environment. Now, COVID-19 has brought on some very difficult type of measures that I think were kind of unforeseen in the fact that the economy was going very well over the last year, and freelancers and small businesses, we were all very excited. We're like, revenue is coming in, we have more clients. Then all of a sudden, overnight, it changed. Even for me personally, and I know for a lot of people within my friend and community network, it's one day we had a whole roster of clients, and the next day we didn't. But this is the beautiful thing about freelancing and owning your own business, is things change so quickly, and if you are pivoting and you are building the type of business where it can adopt in these type of situations, people will come back. And this is actually an opportunity, I think, because of COVID-19. I'm American, I'll be very positive. There is an opportunity coming out of COVID-19, and the fact that businesses are more hesitant on hiring full-time because it is a very expensive employment, Freelancers are quicker getting in the door, getting started on projects, and overall, we are cheaper. This is an opportunity for us to very much leverage.
I actually remember reading one of your LinkedIn posts during the COVID-19 lockdown period. So Megan is quite active on LinkedIn, also on social media. She's always been sharing a lot of very useful insights, tips from her. And I remember you writing something about reaching to your old clients during the lockdown period, and then the result is kind of unexpected. And how did you come to do that? And would you maybe share it with our audience who maybe haven't read that?
So the no secret formula, this is just good business, I'll be honest. Building up a referral network, building up people who can refer you and vouch for you in the world of business is always a positive thing. And in business, we call this like a referral marketing strategy. So every quarter you are reaching out to past clients and getting them to actually refer you to someone else. And then of course there's also incentive hopefully involved in there. Now I did this, I think the second week after they announced, in Germany that they were going to be putting restrictions with COVID. I was able to bring in 2 new clients just from doing that. And it was so easy. I just sent out an email to all my past clients. I posted on LinkedIn. I was like, hey, I'm looking for new work. This is what I do, X, Y, and Z. This is the type of value I offer. Do you know anybody? And this is the thing about asking for referrals. If you don't know anybody, do you know anybody who could possibly know? And so you have this like community where you can share with each other. And people, I do believe in special circumstances like this, they want to help each other. So for example, on LinkedIn, I have friends who are sharing those posts with their community, and that's also how you can make a bad situation into something more positive.
Thank you, Megan. And for Anna, to Martin, and also for Megan, actually, this is more of a question for everyone. What if people are unhappy with their jobs right now? Maybe because of COVID-19, or maybe they decided to take a break from their full-time job and they decided to go freelance. Do you think it's a good idea?
I generally completely agree with Megan because I'm an old finance person. I was in finance business like more than 20 years, and I totally agree that overheads and salaries is one of the biggest and most serious position in your profit and loss statement. So in my opinion, and I also do observe a rather positive trend or many possibilities for freelancers even now, even in this current situation, I think. But I have to emphasize that attitude is really everything in those critical times. So then don't get yourself like down. Stay positive. If you're feeling like your mood is going down, you're getting like almost depressive and so on.
Wine.
Wine is also maybe a short-term solution,
Yes,
not a
yes.
long-term
No.
solution. Maybe
Like a cute add-on.
Yeah, cute add-on, yes, exactly. But and if you feel your attitude is like changing from a more positive to a more negative because of the current circumstances, please don't give up on yourself, and please don't continue this road to this negative direction, because attitude is really everything, especially if you are a business owner or a freelancer. If you feel like those negative depressive feelings, please reach out, as Megan mentioned, to other people. Look for a peer group, new peer group, look for other freelancers, or even contact, like, I know Jessie through LinkedIn. Jessie know probably also other people from LinkedIn. So this is how we meet, let's say, and we can meet and support each other also online. And I really would like to encourage you to try out new ways of behaving, reaching out to other people, especially if you do think, and that especially if you do feel like negative feelings currently.
Martin, do you have any thoughts for people who want to turn freelance at this timing?
It's an interesting question because it's really too early to tell what all of these movements in other companies towards remote work is going to have on the freelance market. There's generally, one of the main reasons people work freelance, or one of these sort of cited benefits, is being able to work from home or have more flexibility. If you suddenly have a large contingent of the formal workforce being given those same benefits, it'll be interesting to see if the freelance world will be able to continue to compete with them, because even though there is a different way that structure is, companies generally, although freelancers can sometimes be more affordable, they do like the idea of having sort of a long-term relationship and building towards a larger vision. So it'll be interesting to see if a lot more freelancers wouldn't start accepting permanent positions into companies that offer remote employment. But I think that's different to what you're doing in the sense of where you're more of a company now.
An agency.
Yeah, you're an agency. I think you're referring to more individual freelancers. So if you're quite risk averse, and I think you could probably agree with that, it's probably going to be a better shot to get yourself a remote position with like a well-paying company and work from home, and to have that freedom without all the risk and all the heartache of trying to find clients, losing clients, having to deal with the P&L and all of that stuff, and paying the bills. So yeah, it really is going to depend on people's personality, but I think there is going to be a shift in terms of people will become less interested in becoming an individual freelancer than they might have been 10 years ago, because of freedom that regular employment is now starting to also provide to people.
Thank you, Martin. So Megan, if someone comes to you today and be like, Megan, I want to become an individual freelancer, maybe next month, what is your best advice you could give? Or the only advice you could give?
This is a good question. I will be honest and say what I said 6 months ago hasn't changed because of COVID. Because in the end, owning a business is hard. You have to be adaptive. You have to have this growth mindset. You have to be constantly pivoting and figuring out the next big thing and how to go into different industries. So how do you make yourself different as a freelancer? Can you define your unique value proposition? What makes you unique in the market? We also heard that in our keynote, right? It's the same thing with freelancers. How are you different in this market, and how are you going to stand out? This is even more important now because in general, the whole freelancer world is so saturated. I even think in the employment world is so saturated. What makes you unique? Unique value proposition. Also, what is your niche? What's your industry? What are you the expert in? For me, I'm an expert in B2B technology. That is mine. And I could even say, I go even more niche into a vertical and say environmental technology. So as a freelancer, these fundamentals of what makes you a good freelancer and a good business owner haven't changed. It's just tougher, I think, in the sense that people are scared now. You're talking to a marketing manager, talking to the person that would be your potential client. They are scared because they're also uncertain of the things that are happening in the world, and it will take longer for you to convince them that you are the right person for the job.
So you're saying now it's not totally related to whether COVID-19 has happened, but more like the psychological part of it. Thank you very much. And now to Martin and Anna, who is in the employment world. Now, as everyone knows that we've been practicing, social distancing, physical distancing, which is sort of what we're doing right now, maybe a little bit less, but we're trying. How does physical distancing change, or has it impacted the process of hiring or interviews, or maybe something that's different? How do you compare it to hiring or interviewing in the normal world?
Well, I'm maybe the wrong person to ask because usually you do online recruiting. So because I'm focused on international recruiting, also because I'm living in Berlin, but I'm actually not from Berlin, not from Germany. So this is like a kind of my expertise, let's say, more international recruiting. But of course, I'm also looking for candidates locally. So, but I do it mainly online together with other colleagues. In this respect, I'm maybe not the right person to ask, because this is like, for me, not a new normal. It is my normal also before COVID. So maybe I will pass this question to you, because I can imagine that you do interviews with some good candidates also face to face, like in real life.
Yeah, so I think Megan said something that made a lot of kind of sense also in the recruitment world, and I think that people are now being a lot more careful. I think in the past, there was this intrinsic value to meeting someone in person, shaking their hand, having a coffee or lunch with them, and really feeling that, okay, I know this person now, I feel I can trust them in some kind of way. So recruitment processes, although they required a bit more effort, were generally quite short, or shorter at least. And what I've seen is quite a bit of an expansion from people, where they want to have more rounds of interviews, because it's all happening over some videos software. And yeah, there's a lot more uncertainty for people, and dealing with that uncertainty as stretched out processes a lot more. And I think for people looking for work, I expect longer processes right now. And I think it will be a while. I think the only thing, I don't know if people will get to that point where they will just now, I'm going to have that same level of trust just by spending 30 minutes on a video call, because there's lots of small social cues, right? The way someone is dressed, the way they open the door, like the way they speak, things like that people pick up on when they meet someone, that sort of instills trust. And yeah, I think that's going to be kind of the main way that it's changing. There are other ways that people are trying to automate things, but they're not working yet. I think it's still going to be probably a few years to figure that out to work nicely.
I see. So now we are jumping to perhaps the most important questions for this panel discussion, and that is, where are the opportunities right now? And where could people out there, be it job hunters, freelancers, look for a successful hunt? Maybe you could speak for your own industry, which company or which industry they are still hiring, they are doubling their hiring effort, or maybe they have less hiring effort, putting less hiring effort into certain positions. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I would answer this question like regardless of the industry. I wouldn't like to focus so much on one industry or just pick industries with the biggest chances. But however, I mentioned IT, but I see this tendency till now. But I really think you mentioned a good point, the necessity to stay flexible. And I think it's a great mindset, especially in a situation in moments of economical crisis, but in case of any crisis, also personal, the personal moments where we don't feel like on our top, let's say. So it's a great attitude to have, like to stay flexible, to stay open-minded, to avoid like a negative mindset, depressive mindset, because this is not helpful. So, for example, for me, I still see a lot of possibilities within interim management. So, for example, when your labor contract was terminated and you are like, you know, not finding, because of whatever reason, a new position, a stable position within your old industry, try to find a good positions as interim manager. So in this case, you can, for example, reach out to big companies as yours and just say, hey guys, I was like employed in the past, but I'm now open for an interim manager position, for example, for the next year or whatever. So per hour as an interim manager, you can obviously earn more. So even if you find a project which lasts like for 3 months and then you are like without a project like for the next 2 months, you still have a good chance for a good average per month, let's say.
What about you, Megan? Which industry are still hiring freelancers? I assume this would be a topic that you are very passionate about.
Yes, this is a hot topic for us. So I've done a lot of work on this actually in my own agency. I've talked to a lot of people within my industry about where things are happening. Where it's not happening, maybe I start there, is if you are in the industries of arts, entertainment, events, these type of fields. What was another one? Small business, like for example, the lawyer office around the corner maybe, or like, better example is like the doctor's office. They're not doing inpatient visits. These are the industries that you need to rethink at this point, because they have drastically decreased their personal impact, their inner engagement with their patients, for example, and they don't have as much money. So what kind of industries are booming? E-commerce. E-commerce, of course, people are online and they're buying. Video streaming, audio streaming, Spotify, Apple, you know, these type of streaming platforms. Where else? In my own industry, in B2B tech, things have kind of done this. Like a little, and it's on the uprise because there is still money coming in for these type of industries. And environmental technology, and specifically, there's a lot of funding actually happening right now in the German government about bringing in these type of resources. So there's still conversation. So these are like actually triggers that you can do for your own, I think, freelancer, is what is things happening in politics and business and things that are triggering and impacting certain industries positively. Maybe there's a certain industry that is getting more funding or getting more attention because of something. That's a potential opportunity for you to go in as a freelancer and find more clients.
Yeah, I very much agree with everything Megan said. I think that covers it quite nicely. And it is really where I think one of the things that works well right now, and it's the only piece I can really add to that, because those are the industries that are doing well. I think if you sort of stop for a minute and just think, like, who's growing, and it's not that difficult to figure those things out. But I think if you want to try and go somewhere where it's not immediately obvious, I go to like Hacker News, or Y Combinator has a great site called Hacker News, and they usually announce all of the funding rounds there way before like it really becomes public knowledge. It's like the first place that a company would put it on. And if you see a company that you like that just got a couple of million in funding, apply immediately. Even just phone them up right then. They might even have put their job ads out yet. Like they would do that first. They would usually say, hey, we've got some money, and then they would say, oh, we need some people. And they kind of figured that out like a day later. So you can kind of get ahead of the problem there and just go look at those places where people are announcing funding rounds, and if you see, oh, that's a really great company, that sounds super interesting, get your resume over to them and speak to them even if there isn't a job out yet, and see what happens. Because the moment like the jobs do go out, as we discussed earlier, then it's thousands of people that will go in. But if you can get a bit ahead of it, you'd have a good chance, I think.
I think it's generally a good advice to expats living in Germany who are not speaking very well German, for example, like to approach startups proactively, because in many startups also expats are welcome who are not fluent in German, generally speaking.
Almost all of the startups in Berlin are English language first, so like there's no German even allowed on Slack channels or anything.
Yeah. So you mentioned a few different channels and industry that might be still hiring, like some hot ones like Spotify, music, video streaming, and also e-commerce. So I guess this is also a topic in Germany that people often ask for a really direct background, say if you want to work in a certain industry. So do you think it's a good time for someone to make a leap into those industries that I just mentioned? Say they don't have a direct, directly related background to that, but perhaps they have some trainings over there, they have related experience. Is it a good time to make the leap and just like throw on the CVs to those companies that are still hiring, because they're hiring, they are the companies that are hiring right now? Do you think it's a good time to make the leap?
Yeah, I think it depends from your current situation, because when you're really in such a situation where your labor contract was already terminated, obviously you need quite quickly a new job. So in this case, I would recommend this interim management solution. So just contact, for example, bigger recruiting companies as yours, just to find another way of working and earning money within your old industry, because your know-how, your market value is also based on your old know-how. And I can imagine for the majority of people who are currently in a difficult situation or lost their jobs, it's like difficult to learn about an industry within 2 weeks and build up their market value in such a short time. So I would suggest maybe define your short-term goals, and your short-term goal could be going into the interim management, let's say, business within your old industry, because interim managers are still looked for. And in the next step, if you think this is the future to go into these businesses you just mentioned, then make a plan and approach also these companies. And then you have a situation that you have already a new job as an interim manager, project-based, but you have still some space to work on more diversity in your resume, let's say. And then in some months, maybe you would collect so much knowledge about this new industry that you could make a safe switch, let's say. So this would be my answer to that question. So how about you guys?
I would say better now than never. I don't think there's ever a good time, honestly, to go into a new vertical or a new industry. So it's just better to go in and go full in and learn as you go. Now, if you don't have experience, let's say you're coming from B2B technology or going to e-commerce, two very separate different fields. But I think where you can basically think through is what are sort of the unique value that you provide and the different tasks and things that you do, maybe as a freelancer, as an employee. Can you switch the voice and the message to be better in this new industry? And it'll take a little bit of thought, it'll take a little bit of strategic thought, but this is where, in the end, it doesn't matter if you're a freelancer or if you're an employee, you are selling yourself to an employer, to a client, and you have to be able to do this, to position yourself depending on who that person is. So.
Yeah, I think changing what industry you're working or doing a career shift is always very hard, because there are other people out there competing against you, right? So if you take a company like Spotify, for instance, they're a very, very high value employer where a lot of people want to work. I would most likely say if you want to change careers entirely, don't try and also go and do it at one of the biggest employers in the world that's that famous, because if you want to, say, for instance, move from marketing to project management and software, there's going to be software managers from places like Facebook applying at Spotify, and there's a very high likelihood that you'd be disappointed. What might make more sense is to, if where you're currently working, you want to pivot into a new kind of position, try and do it internally, or try, because you already have a network of friends there or colleagues that you would get along with well, start learning a couple of points and start taking on some tasks there. But I think, yeah, unfortunately the companies at the moment that are doing well are exceptionally high, like attractive employers to the best people in the world. So they generally wouldn't look at someone because it's not necessary. But if you're internally, people trust you, they know your work ethic, they might give you a shot to pivot over into something else. I'd rather, if I was an engineer and I wanted to move over to product management, I would apply at Spotify as an engineer, and then when I've been there for a few months, I'd say, like, hey, I'm actually also interested in product management, and then sort of try and make the move. But it's different in different fields. I can only mainly speak from the software development world. Might be different. But I agree with you very much that if you want to do that, it's all about how you sell it, how you package it and put it across, and explaining exactly why it is that you would be capable of doing this, or at least learning it very quickly.
And now we have discussed so far a couple of changes. Maybe a lot of them, they're not even changes. We don't have like a big changes so far as we've discussed. A lot of them are doing, they don't really have something to do or much to do with COVID-19, but more of the mindset and your attitude. But we have also discussed a couple of changes. How many changes that we have discussed so far that you think are going to be permanent?
Permanent, it's a good question. I generally think...
Or long term?
Exactly, because I think there's nothing permanent in life generally. Life is about also professional life, about constant change, especially if you are a freelancer or business owner or small business owner. You need to be like really flexible all the time and have an open mindset. So I think definitely COVID will have at least a mid-term, if not long-term influence and impact on the labor market, definitely. International, I would say.
I think it will continue to be more difficult to get in the door. It's going to take, like I said at the beginning, longer for you to build this relationship with people. And it's going to be harder because we're not doing networking events anymore. We're not doing these type of personal. So it's going to be harder to build these like sales personal relationships. But like I always say, I mean, being a business owner and a freelancer is hard in general. And you always have to be thinking and pivoting to what is currently happening. So I would say that's my big tip right now because of COVID is to actually be thinking more quickly. So always be looking ahead. Always don't ever stop looking for clients. Even when you're full, if you have a full roster like right now, don't stop looking for clients. Keep selling and keep making yourself known in the market. I think that's the only way to go through what we're going through right now. Keep pushing.
I think in terms of things that will remain permanent is also, again, quite early to tell. I think about 5 or 6 years ago, Yahoo appointed a new CEO, and she called everybody that was involved in new innovation back to the office. At the time, Yahoo was working mostly, or quite largely, remotely. And companies like Facebook and Google are famously also mostly work on site. And their main reason and their main motivation for that is they feel putting people in a room to solve a problem is a much more productive way to come up with something innovative and new than having people. At the moment, I'm not sure how companies are going to respond, but I think to some degree, I think flexibility is going to become something that will remain. I think the days of like people, especially in the technology industry, of people going to the office 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, I think that will turn more into like, okay, you know, we have a new product thing that we want to work on, let's all get together for the next 2 weeks, do it that way, and then we break apart and go and work on it. I think that will definitely be something that will remain for a very long time. I don't see like changing back to 9 to 5 days a week easily.
Thank you for all your thoughts. And before we finish off the session, I would just like to ask one last question, and that's what are your ways for dealing with the new normal personally in your professional career?
I am always trying to take to see a challenge or a difficult situation as a chance, actually. So I think I have a pretty similar mindset to Megan, and I also do it in professional life as well. So if I feel low spirit, I try to create a new peer group. I try to connect to good souls who are like have an optimistic approach. So this is the kind of way this is my way, let's say, of coping with these kind of topics.
American coming out again. Positivity. I think right now you have to be positive, and what I do as a business owner is making sure that I'm sticking to a schedule. It's so easy to get caught up and keep working, especially when you don't have any clients at the moment. So leaving at 5, leaving your office, going for a walk, going out for a glass of wine, COVID-friendly outside with your friends is something that's very important, I think, for you to keep a healthy mindset, because when you keep this positive and healthy mindset, the clients, the business, these type of good things will fall into place. So you have to have faith that good things are always going to be around the corner for you and your business.
Yeah, I also agree with Megan. Say it again. Generally, I think the biggest challenge for a lot of people, including myself, is knowing when it is work time and when it is me time, and sort of creating that barrier. I've seen various people deal with it in different ways. I tend to go to the office, but a lot of my colleagues who don't, they have very interesting routines where, like, after work they go for like a long walk, shut down their computers and make sure that separation is there. And I think of all of the webinars and the podcasts and things I've listened to about that, that's probably like the one thing that I'm a very big advocate for, is make sure you have a very clear separation between your work life and your personal life. Otherwise, it will just become one big mess, and you'll never feel like you have time to switch off. So I care a lot about that personally and professionally, and that they speak to each other. Very much take a walk, drink some wine, chill out.
I'm glad to have gathered the panelists today to share their 2 cents and thoughts about the impact of COVID-19 that brought about in recruitment, job hunting, and freelancing. I guess one thing we could be really sure about right now, coming to the end of the panel discussion, is that a lot of things, they might not be, they're not there because of COVID-19. A lot of them, they're related to how you think about it, your approach, and like Anna just said, you need some positive vibe, stay positive, get something, approach them good, not good, positive souls out there, and yeah. And now coming to the end, we're going to top this session off by me introducing you to another bottle of wine, because Divine Italian Wine is our sponsor. And we just talked about like having a good bottle of Friuli Sauvignon Blanc to save your soul when you're devastated looking for a job. But what happened when you found a job? You also need to celebrate. And this is when Salice Salentino comes in. This one bottle is from the south of Italy, at the heels of the boots from Puglia. And this is a good bottle of red wine made out of one of the oldest grade Negro Amaro. And whatever, if you found a job, you don't need to worry about waking up and be like, when is my next chance coming? You could get really drunk. This is what we're going to do. We're going to drink some wine right after panel discussion. So if you have, before we go on and finish our white wine, then go to our Salice Salentino, if you have any questions for our panelists and also for our speakers earlier, feel free to go to slido.com. You can just key in our event code, which is Truth Talk Berlin, singular, no space, and you could also specify the names of our panelists or speakers, Marie from earlier from the keynote, and I will talk to you guys later. at Truth Talk Berlin. I am Jessie Hong, I'm the founder of Truth Talk Berlin. You are joining us today for our Q&A session, and here I have my panelists and also my speakers from today. I would also like to welcome my co-host for our Q&A session today, Saunders. Saunders is also our editor at Truth Talk Berlin, and we are going to answer to your burning questions right now. If you would like to submit any other questions, feel free to go to slido.com and just key in our event code, which is Truth Talk Berlin, and specify the panelist, the speaker's name if you would like to. You can also easily upvote other people's questions if they happen to also ask the same questions, so we could avoid duplication. And welcome everyone again. So I will now let my co-host, Saunders, take over.
Okay, thanks guys. You've sent us a number of questions. So the top question we have is actually for Marie, and that is, what do you think about applying in English, even when the job description is in German?
I think there's a couple different answers here. So if the job is for an accountant in a German office, German being the main requirement, I would say in that case, probably no. But I think sometimes, maybe Martin would disagree with me, but sometimes a job description is a little bit like when you're looking for an apartment or you're doing online dating, and these are the lists of requirements that you have. If you may not find everything that you want on the list, the same thing from the recruiters. And if the job is for, in my case, when I was applying in international sales, I actually did apply the job I ended up getting. They had listed German as being one of the requirements, but I filled all of the other requirements. And so for them, they were willing to, let's say, deal with my lack of German because they were really interested in someone that could sell internationally. So if you meet most of the other requirements in the job description and you think you could make a positive impact at the company, then I would say apply for it. And it may be they don't get back to you, but the company is also looking for someone that's skilled. And so, yeah, if there's not another person that can speak German with those skills, you would have a good chance.
Do you guys have any thoughts about that?
I would generally agree, I would say, because it really depends from the job description. So we mentioned several times today startups. So even if a job description in a startup is like in German, you could assume that German is not really the first language in this company. So it really depends from the job description, and languages are usually a fixed point in every job description. So usually it's like mentioned if you need to be fluent in English, in German, or whatever. So I think it really depends from the situation. So I would agree with Marie. So.
Cool. Okay, I'll take the next question. So the next question is, I would like to understand how and on what basis resumes get shortlisted. I guess that could be you, Martin.
So people have different approaches, but I'll tell you like a common approach and the approach that I generally use or recommend. So what we do is when we put together a job specification, we create something what we would call a skills stack rank. And effectively what that just means is we look at all the requirements of the job and we put them in order of importance. And then as resumes come through, we look at the resume and we try to answer the question, to what degree does the person meet these particular requirements, and then also in where they are in the order. So if you're working on a particular, let's say for instance, we're looking for a Python engineer, and then that would be sort of the highest one, and then maybe you're looking for a German-speaking Python engineer, but the German-speaking part might be quite unimportant and more towards the bottom of it. If you do very well on the sort of 3 or 4 key elements of it, it's very likely that your resume will get shortlisted. The other things are sort of nice to haves and are less important. But it's not entirely like a keyword matching exercise in the sense of just looking at that. But we also look at things like, to what degree is this person actually dealt with the level of responsibility that we're looking for the person to deal with. So can they work quite autonomously if that's a requirement, right? If you need to be a specialist in that particular field, etc. But mainly what it comes down to is there's this list, and your skills are then matched against this list, and it kind of describes the scores, and then after that, that's not even a short list yet, that's the long list. And out of those, we'll take that and we'll reduce that to 5, the top 5 out of those, whatever many made it so far, and those top 5 we will reduce maybe even to 3, and then those will go through to the manager.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, next question. Do recruiters skip looking at your CV and cover letter when they see that they would have to sponsor a visa for you?
And also to add on to that questions, because we have got a couple of similar questions regarding CV. So maybe I think people are curious about what recruiters think about when people ask for sponsor for visa, whether it's necessary to have a CV photo on your CV, or how long should they list their job experience, like up to 10 years or past 10 years? And also, does it actually make a difference whether people use a traditional CV templates or with graphics or like the creative templates that a lot of people are going for nowadays? What do you think about this?
So let's sort of, there's a lot of questions in that question. So basic things. Work visas are pretty simple. If you work in a highly skilled, rarefied area, then nobody cares about your visa status. We bring in hundreds, if not thousands, of engineers into Berlin every year. If you work as a entry-level position in maybe something that's not as rarefied, it's unlikely that somebody will go through the effort because they're more likely to find someone locally, which is a lot less a risk for them. So that's really how that works. It's pretty easy to figure that out. If you talk about Berlin specifically, go look at the skill shortage list. If you're on that list, most people will sponsor a visa for you. If you're in technology, most people will sponsor a visa for you. Otherwise, probably not. That's sort of the reality of the situation.
Chief of positions, I would say, because sometimes we cannot find a good candidate for a specific international chief of position or group of chief of for a group, capital group or something. So in this case, obviously,
I wouldn't. When I'm discussing these things, I'm generally like kind of stopping at sort of senior level, like below executive level, because that's a whole different world with a whole different set of requirements, and everything operates differently. I think other things in terms of resume layouts, this I think is what Megan said very nicely earlier, that's about the sell, right? So the areas of your resume that you should be digging into detail into should be the areas related to the job that you're applying to. It might be that your most recent job is not as relevant to the job that you're applying for as the job before that. And then you can really dig into that piece and really show and bring that to the top when you do your summary and really sell and show the connection for the hiring manager or the recruiter. These are the areas that my skills can add value to what you're looking for. If you're sending out exactly the same resume to various different jobs, you're not doing it the right way. You're probably going to get less positive responses than you would have gotten another way. And I think Marie alluded to that as well. Photographs, I think, generally doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, because there's some people say that you should include a photo. Some people say that trend is dying out.
The Germans like photos at the moment.
To be honest, I would say it a little bit depends on the kind of company you're applying to. Like if you're applying to Siemens or an old school German company, I would definitely include a photo because they're going to be used to seeing that. Whereas if you're applying to, I don't know, HelloFresh use is a good example there. Maybe a more startup environment is more international, so the photo may not be as necessary.
Yeah. So I can also comment on this really quick. On the type of presentation in the photo too. Like if you're applying to Siemens, you're not going to wear probably a really bright orange shirt and like a beautiful smile. You're going to have this very traditional business side. From my perspective, even on LinkedIn profiles and doing that is the same idea. It's like, think about the audience and how you present this picture to those people.
Okay, interesting to know.
So the first question maybe?
Yeah, okay, so the first question, a new question we have is if a freelancer is looking for a full-time job, what sort of experience or skills should be highlighted on his CV or her CV? What do recruiters look for?
Again, it comes back to the idea of it depends on what job you're applying for. Right? So it might be like, if you look at something like content marketing, Megan works, there's a whole variety of things you could be doing within that space. But the job that you're applying for might be a little bit more focused. So you might have had clients asking you to work on various different projects, but this new job is very focused towards, I don't know, so let's say social media, for instance, and you want to really highlight those elements of it and get into that and downplay the other bits a little bit more. So usually try and keep your resume to 2 pages, and then that's roughly my rule, and then try and elaborate on the right things rather than just elaborating on everything. And again, if we look at what we were discussing earlier, it makes those thousands and thousands of resumes that a recruiter needs to go through a little bit easier, because they will immediately see, oh, we're looking for someone with experience with like Twitter Flight School or Facebook Blueprints. It's like, oh, you've got all those little qualifications, we're happy, and then you'll probably move forward.
Thanks. Do we have time for one more question?
Yes.
Okay, so I think this will be an interesting one. Any tips for expats in Germany landing a job in a completely different industry, for example, in e-commerce?
You mentioned.
Yeah, generally I would say I think we already started to discuss a little bit about possibilities for expats who are not speaking Germany actually. So I really see Berlin or Brandenburg is a good example. Startups.
Yeah, startups.
Because usually, I think Martin also mentioned it, 99% of the startups, the first language, business, everyday business language is English. So this is the general tendency. So no matter if you are, regardless the industry, I think for expats, startups are generally a good opportunity, I would say.
I would add here too, if you're looking for a total change and you want to go into a different industry, I would focus on the points in the job description where you already have experience. I think as Martin was also talking about, recruiters are looking for, they kind of have their list of things. So see what is listed in that job description that you may already have experience in, and try to focus and highlight those things that you've already done in your prior jobs and how that could work for you in e-commerce if you don't come from an e-commerce background. Some skills are transferable, I think, across industries.
And if you find it difficult, because I also in my job have a lot of contact with foreigners not speaking, who are not speaking German. We need to finish it. Okay, sorry.
Just a little bit louder, so
sorry. In this case, if startups are not an option, you can always try to reach out to peer groups like meetup groups, or try to reconnect with other expats and try what kind of possibilities would come from that new connections, let's say, because there are a lot of platforms, internations.org, meetup, where you can meet Germans or expats who are already speaking German and who already know the whole way, like Marie mentioned. And I'm also not from Germany, as you know, so I also know these kind of processes, and it's always good to reconnect and to share and to look for new, connections to other people.
So I guess this is also a topic that we've discussed a couple of times in past Truth Talk events. Not really, job related, but we somehow talked about it with, what Martin also just mentioned, startup people, they're always hiring almost just English-speaking people. I guess for expats, it's really the first way to step in, and a lot of time it's kind of like a what do you call it?
A stepping stone.
Yeah, a stepping stone, exactly, to make a leap in maybe, in some other industries or some other companies, and getting connection, LinkedIn meetup groups, and there are also expat groups on Facebook, and also international groups out there that could reach out. And yeah, so I guess we have just time for one last question. So
okay. How about when one works in multiple industries, different expertise, should one have separate LinkedIn pages, or does it help to oversee various skills in one go?
One LinkedIn.
Yeah.
One. Everybody agrees.
Yes.
This is a short answer. Perhaps we have one more questions?
Okay then, Martin, there's one for you. What does it say to recruiters if an applicant doesn't have social media profiles? Is it a red flag?
No.
Okay.
No, it's not a red flag. People look at that. Just maybe if you're a developer and you don't have a GitHub repository, then it's easier when you have some things.
Yeah.
But if you don't have Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, nobody really pays attention to that.
Good to know.
So I guess we have still a lot more questions coming up in Slido, and I have seen that a lot of them they are for Martin. So people are interested in you, Martin.
Yeah.
And I guess he's also pretty open with his social media, so people could definitely reach out to him, show him some questions you would like to. And also, if you want to reach out to some other experts, you have something to ask to Megan, who is the founder of Freelancing Women Berlin, a very strong community.
1,500 women.
Yes, community for freelancing women in Berlin, and find a way to support each other, in one way or another. Feel free to reach out to her as well, and also Anna and Maria, our speaker. And I would just like to thank everyone over here for joining us today for this long session. And I hope you have some takeaways from the event today. And I also just like to, thank my co-host, Saunders over here. Saunders is amazing. She is from our team. And also our speakers. You will actually find all of them on LinkedIn, some of them even on Facebook, for the Facebook community, for example. Here we have Anna, we have Megan, Martin, and also Marie. And last but not least, I also like to thank our sponsors again, who is Wildcode School Berlin, who sponsored our shooting space, and also resume.io. I've also seen a lot of people asking about the resume.io account. All you have to do is just to, give us a quick shout out or share a quick takeaway on LinkedIn or Instagram, tag us, and we will reach out, and you will be getting your very own premium account with resume.io. And also for D-Wine, Italian wine, if you'd like to get the 2 bottles of wine, feel free to check them out. They also do aperitivo every Friday, which is pretty cool. And yeah, if you would like to find out what Truth Talk Berlin does, otherwise we always have different kind of events, live events. This is our very first live stream ever, so thanks for joining us. And follow us on social media. You'll find us on Facebook, Instagram, and also on Facebook, no, I mentioned it already, LinkedIn, yes. Truth Talk Berlin, singular. And yeah, in the end, I would just like to thank my team over here, my Truth Talk Berlin team. They have been amazing. What you don't see behind the scene, it's a lot of work. We have our videographer, Andrea, who is doing the live stream, and also Julia. She's monitoring the live stream the whole time, answering your questions, and Lynn, our chief editor, who has been writing all those incredible texts on social media, and Ivan, who is currently taking a photo of me in front of me, and Saunders, who is also our editor and coordinator at Truth Talk Berlin. Thank you again for joining us. I hope you had a great time we had, and now I guess we're just going to enjoy some wine. Yeah, thank you again. See you later and talk to you soon.